Hey everyone, and welcome. We're about to take a deep dive into the history of New York State,
Fascinating history it is, too.
and we'll be using a YouTube video transcript as our source material today.
Yeah, so much to unpack in this one. It's amazing how a state like New York
Right.
has played such a pivotal role in the American story.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what's really interesting to me? It's not just about the last few centuries. It's about the thousands of years of history that came before.
Oh, yeah, going way, way back.
Yeah, think about it. We're talking about Native American tribes who called this land home long before European settlers ever set foot here.
Some dating back to around 10,000 BC.
10,000 BC. It's mind-blowing to think that there were thriving cultures here for so long.
It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it? We
Yeah.
often focus on the colonial period and onward,
Right.
but the story of New York starts much, much earlier.
It does. And the transcript highlights the Iroquois in particular.
Such a fascinating group.
They had their own systems of government, trade networks, agriculture.
Right, a complex and sophisticated society.
Right. It's amazing.
Not just surviving, but thriving.
Exactly. And this was all long before Europeans arrived on the scene.
The Iroquois Confederacy was especially interesting.
The Confederacy.
Yeah, they brought together 5 different tribes under a common framework.
Like an early form of democracy.
Some historians even believe it may have influenced the founding fathers of the United States.
Wow. That's incredible to think about.
It challenges our assumptions about where those ideas originated, doesn't it?
It really does. But then as history often shows us, Europeans arrived and things began to change.
Right. A new chapter unfolded.
And while explorers like Verrazano and Cartier reached New York earlier,
They didn't really stick around, did they?
not in the same way that Henry Hudson did, he was sailing for the Dutch in the early 1600s.
Hudson, he was actually looking for a northwest passage to Asia.
You know what? You're right, he was.
Talk about a detour.
Imagine that instead of finding a shortcut to the east, he stumbles upon this land that would become New York.
And it all started with the fur trade.
A prime location for it, apparently.
Oh, absolutely. That led to the establishment of Fort Nassau in 1614.
The very first European settlement in what is now New York.
First of many.
The beginning of a new era.
Yeah. And soon Dutch families started arriving. The fur trade boomed.
And by 1624, the colony of New Netherland was born,
With New Amsterdam at its heart.
our future New York City.
It's fascinating to imagine what might have been if the Dutch had maintained control.
Right.
New Amsterdam was known for its tolerance and multiculturalism.
Quite different from the English colonies further south.
Yeah, a very distinct character.
But the English had their sights set on this valuable territory.
Oh, yeah, they did.
And in the midst of the Second Anglo-Dutch War, they seized the entire colony.
Just like that New Amsterdam became New York.
And the Dutch era came to an end. Well, at least for a little while.
Right, because the name changed back and forth a few times. It's like a historical tug of war.
It really is New Amsterdam, New York, even New Orange for a bit.
It shows how much global power struggles played out in this new world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But even with those shifts, New York continued to grow.
The population boomed under English rule.
People from all over Europe were seeking opportunities here.
A new life, a fresh start.
It must have been such a mix of excitement and uncertainty.
And you have to remember, they were arriving in a land already inhabited by indigenous peoples,
Right.
leading to complex interactions.
Some more welcoming than others, I imagine.
Oh, definitely. And all of this would be further complicated by the arrival of yet another conflict, the French and Indian War.
A major turning point in North American history.
It really was.
And you know what's striking to me?
What's that?
How New York was right in the middle of it.
Front and center.
The transcript talks about religious and economic rivalries between the British and French,
Reaching a boiling point.
and indigenous tribes were forced to choose sides.
Caught in the crossfire.
A difficult situation to be in.
No doubt about it. The French and Indian War reshaped the colonial landscape
Ended French power in the region.
and had a profound impact on indigenous communities.
It was a pivotal moment.
And in many ways, it set the stage for an even bigger conflict, the American Revolution.
Yeah, it definitely laid the groundwork for what was to come.
The seeds of rebellion were sown.
And New York would be at the forefront of that fight for independence.
Well, absolutely. Ready to stand up for their liberties. New Yorkers were really fired up, aren't they?
Oh, they were ready for a fight.
Had enough of British rule.
The Stamp Act was the final straw.
Yeah, that really pushed them over the edge.
The Sons of Liberty, they were a force to be reckoned with.
Oh, absolutely. They weren't messing around.
And can you believe this? The transcript says that almost a third of all battles during the Revolution were fought on New York soil.
A third.
That's what it says.
Wow. That's incredible. It really highlights how strategically important New York was during that period.
Right in the thick of it.
And what's even more amazing is that New York City was occupied by the British for the entire war.
The whole time.
7 years. Can you imagine? The future capital of the United States under enemy control.
It's hard to fathom.
But even under occupation, New Yorkers never gave up hope.
Resilient bunch.
They continued to resist and ultimately played a crucial role in winning independence.
They earned their place in history, for sure.
And they didn't stop there. After the war, New York made significant contributions to the new nation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Ratified the Constitution. The Bill of Rights was actually drafted within New York's borders.
No way.
And New York City even served as the nation's capital for a short period.
It's like they were destined to be leaders.
It seems that way, doesn't it? But while the nation was taking shape, New York itself continued to evolve.
Always changing.
The 19th century brought a wave of transformation.
From agriculture to industry.
Exactly. And the Erie Canal was a game changer.
I've heard so much about the Erie Canal, what made it so significant.
Well, for starters, it connected the East Coast to the Great Lakes.
Opening up trade routes to the west.
Precisely. It sparked massive economic growth, not just for New York, but for the entire nation.
It really put New York on the map as a transportation hub.
And then came steamboats and trains. All these innovations cemented New York's position as a center of commerce.
It's incredible how quickly things were changing.
A whirlwind of progress, but of course progress often has its downsides.
Like what?
Well, the transcript mentions the displacement of Native Americans.
Forced onto reservations.
Sadly, yes, westward expansion came at a cost for many indigenous communities.
Another reminder that not everyone benefits equally from progress.
Exactly. It's a complex and often uncomfortable truth.
And speaking of uncomfortable truths, slavery and abolition were major issues in the lead-up to the Civil War.
Absolutely. New York had a complicated relationship with slavery.
It had officially abolished it in 1827,
Right. But there were still economic ties to the South.
And many New Yorkers benefited from the institution of slavery, even indirectly.
It was a moral dilemma for many. The transcript mentions Governor Seward.
What about him?
Well, he was a staunch abolitionist, fought for the rights of both runaway slaves and free black residents.
So even though slavery was abolished in New York, there were still issues of racial inequality to address.
Yes, Seward was a complex figure. He understood the horrors of slavery and wanted to see it end completely. But he also recognized the deep divisions within the nation.
Trying to find a way forward.
Exactly. He believed in compromise, and his efforts really put New York at the forefront of the abolition movement.
Setting the stage for their role in the Civil War.
And what a role it was. New York supplied more troops to the Union cause than any other northern state.
They went all in.
Not just soldiers either. Their industries provided uniforms, weapons, everything the Union Army needed.
A massive mobilization effort.
It really shows their commitment to preserving the Union and ending slavery. But it's important to remember that not everyone supported the war effort.
Really, even in a time of national crisis.
There were still deep divisions within society. Some New Yorkers opposed the war for various reasons.
And those divisions sometimes erupted into violence?
Unfortunately, yes. The draft riots 1863 were a dark chapter in New York City's history.
The transcript mentioned those.
They were fueled by racial and economic tensions. Working-class New Yorkers felt that the draft was unfairly targeting them, while wealthy citizens could buy their way out.
I can see how that would cause resentment.
And tragically, much of their anger was directed towards black residents.
A sad reminder that even in moments of national unity, underlying inequalities can easily boil over.
It's a pattern we see throughout history, isn't it? And these inequalities persisted even after the Civil War.
And so what happened next?
Well, New York experienced another wave of immigration in the late 19th and early 20th centuries.
Adding to the already diverse population.
Exactly. And with this influx of new people came new challenges and opportunities. New York was on the cusp of becoming the metropolis we know today.
Millions of people all arriving in New York with their own unique stories, hopes, dreams.
It's mind-boggling, the sheer number of people who came to this one state seeking a new life.
It says in the transcript that by the turn of the 20th century, New York's population had exceeded 7 million people.
7 million, that's incredible.
Imagine the energy, the ambition, the sheer diversity of that population.
It's a microcosm of the American experience itself, isn't it?
It really is. People from all over the world coming together in this one place.
Creating something new, something dynamic, a melting pot of cultures and aspirations.
And you know what's fascinating to me?
What's that?
This wasn't just a moment in time. It was the beginning of a trend that would continue for decades.
New York never stopped growing.